So welcome everyone to our SILS Connections session with Susan Perry. And my name is Lori Haight, and I'm the Career Services Coordinator at SILS. And I wanted to start some virtual alumni programming. So thank you to everyone for indulging me in this event. And I'm going to turn it over to Susan. I'm hoping she'll take a few minutes to tell us a little bit about her, and then we're going to open it up for some Q&A. I have a few, but I'd rather hear from the other people on the call. So we'll let Susan begin. Thank you.
Well, I think you have a full resume from the time I became a director. Before that, my first job was as an Army librarian at Fort Bragg, right before they were getting ready to do the Vietnam War. So I spent a lot of time with Special Forces guys. And then I went from Fort Bragg to the Haight and had a job at the University of San Francisco as a head of circulation. So every morning I would get up and put my librarian's dress on and go up the hill from the Haight to USF. And every afternoon I would come back down and put my blue jeans on and go out to Haight Street, which was 1 block away. So that was pretty interesting. And then I moved from there to Portland, where I told you that I had worked at the Portland Public Library. I got married and I worked at the Portland Public Library for a while. And then my ex-husband and I draft dodged to Canada. So you can tell what kind of a librarian I am. Kind of a shit disturber, actually. Then we came back to Chapel Hill. And he got a PhD in political science, and I worked at the VA hospital as a reference librarian, and then at the acquisitions department at UNC. And from there back to the Evergreen State College, and you know the rest of it. So most of my professional career I spent in an academic institution. And most of that time, what I was doing was trying to build comfortable places for students to study, for faculty members to work, and for the people who worked in the organizations to work. I really wanted to build organizations that were healthy for people to work in, because I had been in some that weren't so healthy. So that's what I've done. And Eliana, what kind of library are you interested in?
Yeah, so before coming to SILS, I worked for a few years in an urban public library in Delaware, and I did a lot of outreach and engagement work, and now I'm working as a student assistant for the academic library at UNC, the Davis Library. And so I really like the work of outreach and engagement, but I'm very open to perhaps like an academic or a public space.
Yeah, and I think either one, you can do the outreach and engagement in either one of them. There's some wonderful work going on in public libraries at this point that's very socially sane, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what kinds of questions can I answer for the two of you?
Well, we actually have 4 students now on the call.
2 more?
Yes. So I don't know if they want to introduce themselves. Lenny, I see you.
I don't see you.
Hi,
I want a picture.
Can you hear me, Susan?
I can see you now.
If you're on gallery view makes it a little easier. I don't know if you're on speaker view or gallery view, Susan.
I don't know what I'm on. I can see at the top of my screen little squares with people in them.
Mm-hmm. Is it a line or is it like the Brady Bunch?
It's little squares with lines between them. And then when I see you down below, you are just like on TV.
She's on speaker view.
Yeah, so speaker view is in the top right corner. If you click on speaker view, it should go to click on it and you'll see the word gallery view and you'll be able to see everyone's picture.
I can't. Okay, here's gallery view. Click on that.
Click on that.
Okay, got it. Oh, there they are.
When I discovered the feature, I was like, oh, so much better.
So, and they tell me who you are.
Hi, I'm Linny Argabright. I just graduated like Katie. I got an information science degree because I wanted to do something with figuring out how I could incorporate programming or like coding or database understanding a little bit to make my work more efficient into an academic library setting.
Oh, well, you're exactly the kind of person that academic libraries need these days.
Oh,
So
good.
when they get opened back up.
Yeah. And my background is in academic publishing. So I was spent like 4 years after graduating from Smith.
You went to Smith?
Yes, and I wanted to point that out because I noticed that you worked at Mount Holyoke.
And I'm still here. I am in South Hadley, Mass.
Oh my gosh!
Did you know that the Smith students this year, because they got sent home before graduation, made their own graduation?
Oh, I heard about that.
They were supposed to have Nancy Pelosi as their speaker, but she didn't come. But
yeah.
I thought that was pretty terrific.
They would do something like that. Both getting Nancy Pelosi and also doing their own graduation.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I've been following what they've been doing quite a bit and love the library progress that they've been making on there.
Yeah, and Susan Fliss, who is the library director there now, used to work for me at Mount Holyoke. Yeah, she graduated from Mount Holyoke and then got a PhD from Maine or somewhere, and sort of came back to Mount Holyoke and then sort of went all around, went to Harvard and then went to Smith. And is a really interesting woman. And there is another librarian who graduated from SILS who works at Smith. Did you know that?
I didn't. I should reach out.
Now I'm trying to remember his name.
Yeah.
He's Joan Lippincot's son-in-law. But I can't remember his name at this point. I'll remember it 4 o'clock this morning. But anyway, if you were interested in Smith, he might be a good connection for you. So you've got my email address, right?
Mm-hmm.
So send me an email and I will put you in touch with him.
Great. That's
okay.
Thank you. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Now we've got one more person here who's been very quiet.
My internet sometimes just stops on its own. So if I get it off, sometimes I'm not trying to be rude. Yes, I'm still figuring this out. I spent a semester like not studying because I had some health problems. Now I'm trying to catch up with my classes. The summer session actually starts tomorrow.
So what's going to happen with the summer session? Is it going to be an electronic summer session?
Yes.
So it's going to be kind of like this?
Yeah. All the classes are taken online right now.
Yeah. And your health is better?
Yeah. I took the surgery, got it over with.
And are you in Chapel Hill?
Yes. I guess I'm a second year or a student, but I still have a year to go from the library science.
So maybe by the time you get finished, things won't be quite so iffy as they are now for people who are on the job market.
Yep.
It's a little rough, I think, right now.
Yeah.
So what else can I tell you? How can I be of help?
I'm quite interested in academic libraries, but
you're interested in
like academic library.
Academic libraries.
I worked at the Duke East Asian Library.
Oh, terrific!
For a year under the Chinese librarian. I think what she does is great, and I want to be in that direction, although I know there are very few spots that are.
But what that means is you're going to have to be at a very large institution, because most of the institutions that have good Asian collections and, you know, special collections are in universities, not in the liberal arts like Renee and I know a lot about, although I worked at Stanford for a while. And that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
You went away.
And like try to learn more about database and programming stuff so that I can get a better chance at doing like finding other jobs than like such a tight spot.
Except that I would imagine that there aren't that many people who have the kind of skill set that you have, who could do the kind of work that you do. And there are enough of those academic libraries that I would start with them. And I would make sure that I got the comfort with the electronic that you need to do anything these days. Which is one of the reasons that 20 years ago, I started thinking that libraries, IT departments, and faculty who were teaching with technology and media services all needed to be part of one organization rather than being separate organizations. Because when I started working, there was a lot of, when I started thinking about it, there was a lot of competition between the library and particularly the IT organizations, and they really needed to be married. So that's why I spend a lot of time working on that issue from probably 1994 until I retired 10 years ago. Because I think that it's really important. And it seems to me that you know a lot more now than I know about the kinds of issues that are being dealt with in libraries having to do with electronics. So what else can I help you with?
Susan, I had a question. I'll jump in while
Laurie.
the students are thinking about others. You just gave us a wonderful example with Lenny and who you might know at Smith and who she might know and back and forth. And, you know, a lot of times when I'm working with students and talking about networking, I get a lot of wrinkly noses, right? Networking is kind of like a used car salesman. It's a little oily, a little squeamish. And it seems that if you're competent and, you know, in the doing what you're supposed to be doing, how valuable is networking? And I'm a big proponent of conversations like these because you don't know who might know someone who could help you. How would you suggest at someone starting out in their career how to be able to drip into these networking conversations without seeming, especially during a pandemic, desperate, but just to make it more fluid and more natural, just in terms of bringing themselves to the table, but then also, you know, learning things they didn't know. Do you have any suggestions for that?
Well, I would have said that it's important to begin to join the organizations that serve us, ALA, ACRL, EDUCAUSE. It's important to be a part of those. And when I first started, because you remember I was kind of a hippie, I didn't think that was all that important. And so until I went to Stanford, I eschewed ALA. You know, I didn't think anything about getting involved with ALA. And I got there and David Weber, who was the library director, said to me, which parts of ALA do you want to be involved in? I mean, he was teaching me things about being an international librarian that I had never thought of. And in fact, he was right. I should have been involved in those. Now, I don't know what's happening now with ALA and EDUCAUSE and so forth, but I think that it would be, an ACRL, but I think it would be a good idea to see what's going on with them and to participate, volunteer for committees. It turns out that one of the committees that I was on, Charles Lowry was on at the same time. And I don't know if you know who Charles Lowry is, but he's a member of the Board of Visitors at UNC along with me, and was the head of the Association of Research Libraries for a long time. He wasn't at the time. I can't remember where he was. He was at some university. But getting involved in those things is important, not because the work is so exciting, because I can remember being damn bored at a lot of those committee meetings, but because of the people that you get to know. And you've been at Duke, and so you need to be working with the person there who was your boss on other people that you ought to know within that specialized field, because she can probably help you, or she or he can probably help you with that. And if not that, I have 2 grandchildren who are going to the Alice Feng Yu Chinese Immersion School in San Francisco. They'll get you a job as a librarian there. They're learning Cantonese and Mandarin. And when they're in the 8th grade, they will go to China. Can you
Wow.
believe that?
That's wonderful.
You can go there and be their librarian.
We just heard from Katie in the chat that NCLA is meeting virtually. So I think there are some shifts from these professional development organizations to try and have some virtual connections. So that's good.
And I think even a virtual connection is good, but when they start being literal connections, I think you serve yourselves well to go, because I didn't do that until I was 40, I think. I sort of eschewed all those things. I thought, this is ridiculous stuff. But it's very good for helping you to get to know the people that you need to know to be able to get ahead in your career. And get ahead in your career can mean just anything. It can mean that you want to stay and be the very best reference librarian in the world at Smith College. Or, it doesn't matter what getting ahead is. I never really thought of myself as a person who would be a director. And as a matter of fact, the only reason I did it was I was at Evergreen, and I don't know if any of you know the Evergreen State College, but it's a very imaginative, or it was at the time that I was there, institution, interdisciplinary institution. The librarians were members of the faculty, and in order to keep their faculty membership, they had to teach 1 quarter out of 9. So the first time I taught, I was teaching in a coordinated studies program called Self-Exploration Through Autobiography, in which the students had to write 50 pages of autobiography a week. And boy, did I ever read a lot about teenage boys and their sex lives. And they had to read some very good autobiographies, Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man. Then we had seminars on that. And anyway, I was out of the library, and the provost came to me and he said, "Susan, we have pitched out the dean and we want you to come back and be the dean." And I said, "Byron, I don't know how to be the dean." He said, "You go back in there and you listen to these people. They are hurting. They need somebody who will listen to them." And I realized that it's important to build an organization in which people are heard, and that they help build the organization, and that they help make the fun of the organization, and that it's perfectly terrific to have fun. So I really enjoyed building those kinds of organizations, but I never thought that that was something that I would do. I thought I would be a reference librarian for the rest of my life. Anyway, what next?
Anybody have any questions they'd like to either chat and I could read out loud, or unmute yourself and I can
just don't ask me to sing.
Yeah, I have an unmiked question, and an easier question. So let me figure out my question that's less developed. But with Lori, Lori's management class, we were talking about like leadership, and like what you were saying with, I wasn't ever expecting to be a dean. How can you like start changing the culture for the better to get that, like, we're going to be like this now?
You mean how did I start changing the culture, or do you mean from the position where you are? Well, what we did.
How about both? Yeah.
Okay, what I learned a lot when I was at Stanford from John Sack, and I don't know if any of you know who John Sack is, but he was the head of Highwire Press for a long time. And actually, when I went to the Stanford Data Center, he was my boss. He was the head of the Stanford Data Center. And the way that we worked was that we developed 3-month rolling plans. So we started with a general overall plan for the year, and every 3 months we would update it. And when we first started it, I really hated it. But then as it went along, I realized that what it did was to keep you moving forward. The other thing that we did was that once a year at Mount Holyoke, we would have an advance. We never had a retreat, but we had an advance. And at the advance, we would do planning and investigation about ways that we thought we could be of better service to the organization. So we kept focused on what the work was and what needed to be done and what got done every 3 months and what didn't get done and why it didn't get done. And I believed and still believe that organizations should be very flat so that, and I know this sounds ridiculous, but there were 13 people who reported to me. And I met with each of them, once every other week, and I met with all of them together at least once a month. And then every 3 months, we would do our planning. So a lot of what John taught me had to do with keeping to track because you've got a plan and it's written down. Does that make sense?
So what could we be doing as like entry-level type of employees to try to contribute to that?
As entry-level people, find out where the rest of your part of the organization is, and then without being obnoxious, because sometimes entry-level people can come in and stand back and do, without being obnoxious, suggest ways that you could improve the service of that part of the organization, or things that you yourself bring to the organization that are skill sets that it doesn't appear that anybody else has, and volunteer to do that part of the work if nobody is anointing you to do that part of the work. But getting along with the people that you work with is really important. And I don't think that I'm trying to think if there was ever a time that I didn't get along with the people that I worked with. I think I've always been able to get along with them. And I don't think there was anybody that I truly despised that I worked with. So some people were a little lazy. And having grown up on a farm in North Carolina, I was not lazy. You have to work when you grow up on a farm.
Definitely.
So getting to know the people that you work the most closely with, adding your skill set to their skill set, helping to move your part of the organization forward, getting to know the people in the other parts of the organization that are most closely aligned with your own, respecting the work that they do, and seeing if there are ways that what you do and what they do can fit together. Does that make sense?
Susan, can you expand a little bit on that, owning what you can change in the process, and how is that more of a level of confidence, or is it more of you were given leeway by people that you reported to, or what combination of that do you think is that where you can figure out what part of it you carry forward?
Well, I think you need a little while. to figure out, unless you've got a really good director in your part who can tell you what they expect of you right off. Now, when I went to work for John, he wrote me an expectation thing that was 3 pages long. Because it was in the data center and I had come from the libraries, I understood about every other word of it. It took me a while, but I got the feeling that what he wanted me to do was to take a small group of people and begin to develop a program that would move the Stanford organization, the 2,500 administrative assistants on the Stanford campus, from paper-based transactions to electronic transactions, and do it in 3 years. So we did. You know, we would meet with people and say, and I think he hired me because he knew that I knew a lot of people on the campus. And that's another thing that's really important, is to get, if you're on an academic campus, to get to know people on the campus who you can serve and they can support your work. So I knew a lot of the administrative deans on the campus already. And we would meet with them and they'd say, well, we don't have a computer to do this with. And we would say, well, which would you like, a Mac or a PC? Because we had a lot of money. And so we'd give them the computers and then they'd say, well, we don't know how to use these computers. And we would say, here is the list of courses that we offer. Which ones do you need to sign up for? And then they would get sophisticated enough that they would say, we don't like the way this transaction works. And we would say, well, what needs to happen to make the transaction work better for you? And that's how we wound up moving people within 3 years from paper-based to electronic-based transactions. So getting to know the people in the organization, around the organization, that are important to you. Like, you know, think about if you're in a public library, who else do you need to know outside of the library? Do you need to know the mayor?
Yeah, definitely governmental officials, nonprofit leaders in the area. If you're working with youth, like the education leaders, you know, housing folks, just the gamut, yeah.
Very great. That's a really great response. And in academic institutions, you need to know the provost, you need to know the deans, you need to know the faculty who are within the area that you're interested in. And in fact, I'm a great believer in subversive work. And one of the things that I like to see most was when an IT person or a librarian would get to know a faculty member well enough that they would ask them to help teach a class. And that happens, but you have to go to them. They're probably not going to come to you with that kind of thing. And it may take a couple of years, but it's important to get to know the faculty well enough, or the people who run the youth organization in an institution or in a city, or the social services people well enough to be helpful. I don't know if this is still true, but one of the public libraries that I used to admire a lot was the Queens Public Library. Is that still a wonderful library? Do you all know about that one? They're still doing really, really good work, are they?
I have heard good things, yes.
Yeah, I think so.
So find out what you can about them. One of the things that was really interesting about them is that there were like 36 different ethnicities within that borough. And so they dealt with all of them in some way or another. And I think that would be something that you would really want to know, Ajo, because if you worked in Vancouver, BC, for example, you know, there is a really large Asian community, for example, in Vancouver, BC, in San Francisco, and getting to know the people who are the leaders of that community might be really helpful for whatever work you did. It might be public library work, or it might be academic library work.
Lenny, had your thought gotten your question more formed?
Oh, I asked that one.
Oh, good. Okay.
Well. My other question was, can you tell us a little bit about EDUCAUSE?
Can I talk about EDUCAUSE? Well, I was on the board of EDUCAUSE.
Oh, I didn't know that.
A long time ago, when Brian Hawkins was the head of EDUCAUSE. And I spent the last part of my career working more closely with EDUCAUSE than I did with ALA or ACRL. The reason being that they were interested in information, but they were interested in technology and information together, and that's what I was interested in. I was interested in the integration of information and technology more than the separation of the two. And I think they're still doing that. I also was involved with what was then the Fry Leadership Institute. I don't know if you know about Fry, but you're early enough in your careers that it's not something that you would be interested in right now, but it was for people who were on their way up and who were at the pre-director level, librarians, IT people, and faculty members who use teaching and technology, trying to help them understand why they ought to be working together, essentially, and how to encourage them to do that and to become leaders in their organizations. And in fact, they have done that. Most of them have done it. A lot of them have anyway.
You said one of your newer passions is WiderNet.
Yeah. Now, do you know about WiderNet? Do any of you know about WiderNet?
I know that Cliff Misson has said with this pandemic, he's always willing to take unpaid volunteers because they're always looking for bright, motivated students. I know a lot of the graduates are focused on a job search, but as a in-between thing, I know Cliff's been volunteering that information. So I just thought it'd be interesting to bring up.
Yeah, and I think that I've been really passionate about it because I'm passionate about international service to international organizations. And that comes from the time that I worked on to build AMICAL, which is the International Organization for American Universities Abroad, for the librarians, faculty members, and IT people in the American Universities Abroad. And in that capacity, I went to places you have never heard of. Bishkek. Now, how many of you know Bishkek? Any of you? It's in Kyrgyzstan. Have you ever heard of Kyrgyzstan? Well, it's tucked up next to China, and it's on the Silk Road. And I'm very fond of Bishkek. Anyway, because I care about the international and because Cliff is passionate about the international, what they're doing is providing big collections of electronic information to teachers, students, and medical people who don't have access to the internet. And, you know, we think the internet is everywhere now. Not so. So there are two parts to WiderNet. There is the part that provides the equipment and the training, and then there's the part that provides the content. And UNC students, SILS students, have been working on the content provision for, I think, forever. That WiderNet UNC, right?
Yes.
Is part of a I guess people have volunteered, or are they work study students? Do you know, Lori?
Both. There's
Both?
work study students, but we've also had field experience students there. So a volunteer internship. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that it's fascinating to know something about that organization. I mean, they're serving libraries, schools, medical places all over the world. Nigeria, Ethiopia, Pago, India, I mean, you name it, and places that, and they're serving prisons in the United States because the prisoners can't have access to the raw internet, but they can have access to information. And so the information that the students in WiderNet UNC build can go to the prisons in the United States. So if you're interested in that, it's a really fun thing to work with, I think, and to get to know the people who are working on it. It's a very small, struggling always organization. So if any of you are filthy rich, giving them some money would be a really good thing.
Does anybody have any other questions today for Susan? I know we're about at our time.
Well, just know that if there's any way that I can help you find jobs, let me know. You know, if you think about places that you'd like to know, and I happen to know somebody there, I may and may not, or may not, I will be happy to see what I can do to put you in touch with human beings.
We really appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And if there's anything else I can help you to get started on your career, just let me know. You've got my email address, and I'm spending a lot of time on email these days, as are the rest of you, I'm sure.
Yes, definitely.
Hey.
Thank you so much.
Oh, it's nice to meet you. Good luck with your careers.
Thank you so much, Susan. This is great.
Great. Thanks for coming for a chat.
Yes, thank you. It's really informative. Yeah.
Good.
We really appreciate it, Susan. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm going to leave now.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
We appreciate it. Bye. And I was telling everybody at the beginning that I'll be sending out a brief survey, hopefully by the end of the week, so we can make any suggestions. We hope to include and continue to have these through 2020. And so we'd love to hear from you of different topics or different SILS alums that we can get into these types of events. Our next one we're hoping to do mid-July, and then another in early fall. So you'll be getting an email from me, hopefully Friday, with a survey link. Won't be long, but we'd really appreciate your insights. So thank you. Bye.